Ministry is all that we do together. Ministry is that quality of being in community that affirms human dignity, that beckons forth hidden possibilities, that invites us into deeper, more constant, reverent relationship, and carries forward our UU heritage of freedom and hope. So my friends, let's celebrate our 19 years of shared ministry here in our annual program meeting. Come, let's worship together. Please rise in body or spirit. Our first and only hymn this morning will be number 65, in your gray hymnal, the sweet June days of our Come Again. And I want you to know it is my predecessor, Robbie Walsh's favorite hymn. So please rise.
Let this flame be to us a symbol of the wholeness we seek.
Its brightness dispelling gloom, lighting a path to faith and hope.
Its glow reminding us of the sacred bonds that link us to all living things.
Its radiance calling us to cast the light of freedom, justice, and peace upon all the world. Please be seated. Good morning. Whoever you are, wherever you are in your spiritual journey, for this 1/2 hour, you are part of this congregation and you are welcome. This is, of course, our abbreviated worship service before our annual program meeting. The intent here is for this service to end at 9:30. I invite you to take a 10-minute break or so at 9:40. Sam Clifford and Ella will be offering a presentation that they are, you'll hear it, they'll explain what it is. It's a school project that they're involved with, which will help us learn about accessibility. And we will start our annual program meeting at a little after 9:45. So I'll turn this over to Michael. It has been our custom in the last few years to recognize folks in our congregation who had passed away over the past year. And although I've done several memorial services and graveside services, there's only been one person, a member of our church, who passed away this last year, Mary Ann Kaufman.
Good morning. So this is the 19th time Catherine has generously and graciously invited me to share the pulpit with her prior to our annual spring meeting. I'm so grateful to her, the worship committee, and to you all for giving me this opportunity, which I have cherished. It's my privilege today to remember a remarkable person, Mary Ann Kaufman. I first got to know Mary Ann when she was the chair, and we both served on the Committee on Ministry, acting as sounding boards, advisors, and occasional admonishers of our minister, Robbie Walsh. Mary Ann always offered sound advice, colored with support, compassion, and good humor. I next knew her as the best math teacher any of my 3 kids ever had. You knew she loved the subject, you knew she loved the kids. At teacher-parent conferences, she was, no surprise, always prepared, insightful about each child, and compassionate about any difficulties they were having. She was a true gem of Marshfield High School. She was also a gem of a parishioner here. In 2020, when she understood her long struggle with cancer was nearing its inevitable end, she volunteered to lead a fisherman's service on Zoom. She delivered a thoughtful, compassionate, and humorous, never maudlin package of advice about how to live a good and meaningful life. It was one of the best fisherman services I've ever witnessed. I think it's still online, so if you're interested, send me an email and I'll forward you a link. Mary Ann stayed healthier than perhaps she had expected, for in addition to her many other attributes, she was strong-willed and stronger than she looked. So in the summer of 2021, she delivered yet another fisherman's service, this time out on our lovely patio, where she talked about one of her favorite subjects, Fibonacci numbers, complete with explanatory posters she had prepared herself. By the summer of 2022, her health was so shaky that she declined to do another fisherman's service and resigned from the cell phone grant task force as she felt she could no longer contribute. But despite all that, she attended all of the meetings and discussions about the future of the tablets in the sanctuary. Despite her frailty and the risk of infection, she told me she came because it was an important issue and she wanted to make an informed, considered decision about how to vote. That was pure Mary Ann. So responsible, so conscientious, so wonderful. Thank you, Marianne, for all the gifts you have given us and so many others during a well-lived and meaningful life. Amen. The morning offering for the work of the church will now be given and gratefully received. Searching for Catherine. Of the many wonderful experiences I've had here, one of the best was serving on the 2003-4 search committee. Here's an overview of the process with a few stories from the search. To meet our oath of confidentiality, I won't identify any of the other candidates by name or even by gender. There were 9 of us on the committee, including Lindy Banks, Nancy Delano, Dawn Fleming, now McKechnie, Carl Howerton, Bonnie Jernigan, Cindy Ladd Fiorini, Regina Mortland, Fred Stevens, and me. Our first task was to select a chair. We wisely picked Fred, and he proved a resourceful, gentle, and effective leader. Next, we had to produce a huge notebook describing who and what we were as a church and our hopes and expectations for a new minister. This was a major undertaking with lots of research and conversations with members at a series of cottage meetings that we held in committee members' homes. The notebook was on paper, as the internet was in its infancy. We turned our notebook into the UUA, who distributed copies to ministers who had expressed an interest in the church. Candidates produced their own notebooks filled with bio information, statements of philosophy and theology, and sample sermons. We got about 20 such candidate packets. We diligently read through them all, and after much discussion, identified 5 ministers for follow-up. Observing UUA guidelines, we followed the same process with every candidate. It was intense, all condensed into one weekend. That included 2 dinners, a breakfast, 2 lunches, a tour of Duxbury for the out-of-towners, a Saturday morning walkthrough of the church when it was deserted, since this was all very hush-hush, a 3+ hour interview session where both we and the candidate were questioned, and then a candidate sermon at a neutral church, and after the candidate left, a debriefing by the committee. For the Sunday sermon, the candidate was presented to that congregation as simply a guest minister, with no hint of our purpose in being there. The search committee members came incognito, sitting in groups of 2 or 3 without acknowledging anyone else in the other groups. This was the closest I've ever come to feeling like some sort of spy. For no particular reason that I remember, Catherine was the 4th candidate we scheduled to see. I think going later in the process turned out to be an advantage for both Catherine and us. We got better at asking and answering questions, which helped both she and us get a better sense of each other. But as you will see, there was an unappreciated danger in pushing her weekend that far back. Regarding the other candidates, I think most of us were disappointed with the first candidate, who looked better on paper than in person, particularly in the pulpit. I thought the second candidate was better, but they didn't really wow me, and I was hoping for a wow. The third candidate was by far the strongest we'd seen, but I worried we might be more interested in them than they were in us. We might have been just a bit too suburban. Finally, even before we met Catherine, we learned that our 5th candidate was likely getting an offer from another church. We mutually agreed to suspend their candidacy pending further developments. Only a couple of committee members who rotated attended the Friday dinner or the Saturday breakfast. I was one of the lucky ones to have the initial dinner with Catherine. We went to Tinker's Dam in Norwell, but on a Thursday night, because our talent show was scheduled for Friday. Dinner was lovely. Catherine's prior career and her mid-career pivot to the ministry were inherently interesting. She was an excellent dinner companion, warm and personable, and obviously very bright. It was a good start. At the talent show the next night, we learned our search landscape had suddenly changed. Candidate 3 had accepted an offer from another church. Now we were really searching for Catherine. We needed her to be good. We wanted her to be spectacular. And she was. I don't remember much about our interactions with her Saturday afternoon and evening, except that it all went fine. There were no red flags, as there had been a couple of other times. By the end of the evening, I think we were all very impressed with her. On Sunday, she preached at a UU church in Greater Boston, again under this guise of "here's your guest minister," while some unfamiliar faces were spread throughout the whole congregation. She focused in her sermon on the title of her sermon was Time, and she focused on how we need to resist the temptation to become slaves to the clock, but to find ways to live a freer, more flexible life. As was typically the case, Catherine stayed longer at the church than we did, speaking with the host minister and others she knew there. So we had some downtime before we gathered at the restaurant that Nancy Delano chose, a Bertucci's on the VFW Parkway. As an aside, selecting and arranging for these restaurants was one of Nancy's main jobs on the committee, and she took it very seriously. She and her husband, Bob, always had a meal at the possible restaurant first, to try it out, to make sure it met her standards of excellence before she made the reservation. I always loved Nancy. But back to the downtime. This turned out to be my favorite moment in the whole search process. 5 of us, Dawn, Bonnie, Cindy, Regina, and I, all crowded into I think it was Dawn's VW Bug. We were so happy. Catherine's sermon had been great. She was great. The atmosphere in that tiny car bubbled with joy and relief. We were giddy over the prospect that after months and months, we had found our new minister. I think the five of us realized we had always been searching for Catherine. But of course, we still had to convince her. When the committee got settled at our table, Catherine was still a few minutes away, and I think it was Bonnie who suggested that we all take off our watches and pile them in the center of the table. It was quite a pile, no ubiquitous cell phones replacing wristwatches yet. And it was a brilliant idea. It signaled that we got the message of her sermon. It also hinted that we came from a slightly quirky, fun-loving congregation, not afraid to let our hair down a bit, something I think we hoped might appeal to her. The meal was celebratory. We all felt good about how the morning had gone, but I still had one question to ask, and the answer might complicate things. One of my jobs on the committee was to draft the letter of hire with the successful candidate. This included the final details on pay and benefits. We had talked to all of the candidates about money, but Catherine's situation was a little different because the parsonage was thought of as a big piece of the compensation. Catherine and her family were well settled with no need of a new home. So across that dinner table, I asked Catherine if, since she wouldn't be using the parsonage, would she expect an increase in her salary over the rate we had been offering? I had no idea if she had already considered this issue and had an answer ready. I imagined seeing the wheels turning inside her head as she calculated the best answer to give. She didn't really blink an eye. Instead, she calmly said, no, she was satisfied with the pay package and would not be asking for more in lieu of living in the parsonage. She could probably see the whew that spread across my face. What a relief. After saying our goodbyes, the committee gathered at Lindy's apartment in the village where all of the interviews had been conducted. It was time to make a decision. The conversation was quick and easy. We all felt Catherine was the one. I think Fred called her to tell her the news, and just as important, to learn whether Catherine was interested enough in us to drop and suspend the rest of her search and commit to coming to First Parish for an intense 8 days of preaching and meeting with members of various committees. This would be prior to an all-church meeting after she delivered her second sermon, when the congregation would vote on whether to call her as our next settled minister. Fred asked the question, and I guess you know, she said yes. Our committee did a good job. I've followed the histories of the other candidates a bit, and I don't think any of them ended up having as long or as successful a ministry in their next church as Catherine has. But we were also lucky. We didn't understand that by following the pace we did, with Catherine among the last to be interviewed, we ran the risk that she might have been scooped up by some other church before we got the chance to show her what a good match we would be. But in the end, luck and grace were with us. As they say, cream rises to the top, and Catherine was the cream of our crop. Lindy, Bonnie, and Nancy, all now departed, would be proud.
So I think that's very interesting for you all to hear. This is the process you'll be going through when you search for your settled minister. You'll have 2 years of interim, but as Michael has outlined, searching for your settled minister is quite a complicated, complex process. So that's what you have to look forward to. When I read Michael's words, he sent them to me the other day, I said, this is the first time I knew that you had 5 potential candidates. Numbers 3 and 5 had dropped out. I was number 4. You didn't like number 1 and 2. So, and what Michael really doesn't know and what you all don't know is, it's interesting, Michael just said something about, my being late in the process might have meant that I took another church like numbers 3 and 5 did. And I actually turned down 2 churches waiting to kind of have the process play out with you folks. So I think the takeaway for the search 19 years ago for me was this. I transitioned from law to ministry, and I remember saying to my husband, David, I did everything I wanted to do in law. I owned a law firm. I was one of the first female trial attorneys in Boston. When I went into ministry, my calling was very different. I didn't want to climb some big ladder of success. I wanted to fall in love with a congregation and have a shared ministry for as long as it worked for both of us. And I remember when First Parish, Robbie left, and First Parish was in search, and we only lived 2 streets away. And my husband, David, said, this would be perfect. You could practically walk to work. And I said, no, I need to feel called. I already did the one career with the, sacrifice and all that. I want to enjoy my career in ministry. So I was very open to getting to know you all, but I was also open to the possibility that perhaps this was not going to be a good fit. And from the moment I met the search committee and then the congregation during candidating week, it was so clear to me that this is where I wanted to be. The image for me was, as I met the search committee, and from the whole search process, that incident's exactly what I remember. When I came back into Bertucci's after having preached at Theodore Parker Church, which in West Roxbury, which is where I'm from. That's why it took so long, Michael. I saw people I knew. I went into the restaurant and everyone had put their watches in the center of the table. I thought that was joyful. It was playful. It was in keeping with the theme of the sermon. And it clicked for me. And then when I met you all that candidating week, I would come home and I'd say to David, I am falling in love with these people. They might be the church right around the corner from us, and it's totally, unexpected that this works out that way, but I just feel this is where I'm called. And there's one thing I want to add that really carried me through my whole transition from law to ministry. Becky was 2 years old at the time, my Becky, and we had 5 other kids, and I think 3 of them were in college at the time. And I owned a law firm, and with a lot of litigation cases that were, 7 years out for trial dates. And people would constantly say to me, how is this ever going to work? And they'd have that face. How is this ever going to work? How are you going to pull this off? And I would always say to them, I have no idea, but my path is created under my feet. And my friends, I find in life that when you really believe that your path is created under your feet, everything falls into place. So here I am on a nationwide search, and I end up falling in love with the congregation right around the corner from my home. And I just have to smile. My path was certainly created under my feet, and it led me to you all. And I am forever grateful to the search committee members, because it's a lot of work. I don't want to discourage you from volunteering, but it is a lot of work. And I do hold in my heart the members who have departed, and the members, I so appreciate the members who are still with us today. So I guess I I want to finish by saying, seek and you shall find, and my search brought me to you, and I have deep gratitude for that. Thank you. So we will now conclude our worship service, and Ed will play a nice recessional piece. It is, we're not too late. Why don't you take 10 minutes to get some food and come back into the sanctuary. And in 10 minutes, we will invite Sam and Ella to do their presentation, and we will begin our annual meeting. There's a benediction.